Hi, everyone. This is Chris.
And this is Julia, and this is episode number 27 of the Mixology Talk podcast.
Now, I don't know about you, but since I first started working as a bartender, suddenly all of my friends expected really fancy cocktails at the parties that we would throw.
We're pretty fancy people, though.
Exactly, and we throw a lot of parties.
Oh, just like every day.
But I really didn't feel like bartending, especially at my own party. It just kind of felt a little bit like work to me.
Yeah, you don't want to work all day as a bartender and then go home and do the same thing again.
Yeah, so over the years, I kind of figured out a couple tricks that lets us serve really great craft cocktails without forcing me to play bartender all night.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about how you can throw holiday parties or any party with really, really great cocktails, you know, not just a rum and Coke, although you know I like a rum and Coke. We're going to talk about how you can throw a party with great cocktails and not actually be shaking drinks all night.
Exactly. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. You have the make-ahead kind of setup going, and you also have something that gets the guests involved.
Which is a nice way of saying putting them to work.
Exactly. And it's kind of entertaining, it's engaging, gets them involved with the whole thing. And, they get hands-on and get to make their own cocktails the way they want them.
Whether they want to or not. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute.
And if they feel like it, they can do dishes, just
That's
saying.
true. We weren't going to cover that. Maybe next week. How to get your guests to do dishes.
Yeah.
So back to the make-ahead.
Yeah, so back to the make-ahead. There's a couple ways to set this thing up, and it can be done in advance, which is a beautiful thing. So the very first way of doing it is to make a punch.
Now, I think punch bowls, or punches in general, have a bad rap.
Yeah, I would kind of think like 1950s kind of style of entertaining.
Or like at best, Jungle Juice.
Ah, Jungle Juice, yeah.
You guys should see the smile on his face right now. I wish you could see it. I have had some amazing punches, some truly craft cocktail punches. And just because you're serving something in large quantities does not mean it's going to be made out of Kool-Aid.
Yeah, and one of the biggest people behind this whole punch movement is a gentleman by the name of David Wondrich. And in his book called Punch, he really outlines the history of the punch. And, it's really a fascinating book. So if you're interested in it, it's a great read. And he's a really, really great writer. So you'll definitely be entertained. But, it's something that is really easy to make ahead. There's only 5 different ingredients. And something I learned recently is punch is actually I believe the Farsi word for 5.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm. So there's 5 ingredients in a punch. So you have sweet, you have sour, you have spirit, you have water, and you have something like a flavor, an additive of some form. And it's typically like tea or something like that.
I thought it was an English word for what happens when you have too much of it.
Actually, the English are the people that popularized it.
Ah.
But I see what you've done there.
But the moral of the story is just because you're making something ahead and putting it in a punch bowl does not mean it's going to be terrible. There's a lot of really great options, and we'll include a link to David Wondrich's book in the show notes over at, you guessed it, mixologytalk.com/27, I think.
I think so, yeah. The other thing is that you can prepare everything in bottle format. So like wine bottles, you can prepare them in that in advance and basically just put it in a wine, like an ice bath.
Right, exactly. So just like your guests are very used to seeing wines and beers in a large bucket of ice, you can just go ahead and pre-prepare a cocktail in some 750 milliliter bottles, or even we've used Magnum bottles too in the past. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And folks can serve themselves.
Yeah, and you can decorate them, put nice looking labels on them, and, have some fun with it for sure.
Or not.
Or not. Yeah, exactly.
We're usually lazy about that.
And the last one is those really cool, elaborate-looking self-serve drink dispensers, basically.
Yeah, they're super in vogue right now. I'm seeing a lot of them on sites like Pinterest and all of the big wedding planning sites. It seems like they're all over there. But I don't think you have to relegate this type of thing to weddings. I think these drink dispensers are a great option because, again, we're almost crossing over into the guest self-serve territory. Folks can just pour their own drinks. And you're just pre-prepping everything entirely in advance.
And, you don't have to go strictly the punch route or, all of these routes for your cocktails. But this is a fantastic way to get a drink in somebody's hand the minute they walk in the door. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You see a punch bowl, you grab a glass, and you serve yourself. You don't really have to ask permission. It's just kind of the customary thing to do.
Exactly. Nobody's going to ask you how to operate a punch bowl.
Now, there's a couple... yeah.
If they do, they don't get any.
Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind when you're doing any form of make-ahead cocktail, and that is, a lot of the like purees and stuff like that will actually separate out. So like spirit-driven cocktails like Manhattans and even Old Fashions can be great options to do make ahead.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit careful. I know that in the industry there's sort of a long-standing conversation right now about pre-prepping cocktails and what pieces you can and can't pre-prep. I think we found in our experience that the safest bet is going to be a spirit-driven cocktail. It'll also be the most expensive because you're going to have a really, really spirited drink, and you will certainly want to prepare your guests so that they know the correct portioning.
Right.
But also, if you are going to go with something that has citrus in it, just know that right around the 4-hour mark is the ideal time period. Don't juice your citrus 4 days in advance. That doesn't seem to go too well. The flavor just doesn't come through. But about 4 hours in advance is optimal. Now, there are some other options for citrus, right?
Yeah, there are a couple different options for citrus, and I think we'll cover that in the tips.
Oh, yeah, that's later.
But
I'm messing everything up here.
What happens when you add all these ingredients beforehand, they tend to mute themselves out, and it just becomes kind of a boring cocktail. So wait for that 4-hour mark, and everything will still be fairly lively and identifiable, and it won't get lost in everything else. So,
which is what you want in a party guest as well. Lively, identifiable, and not getting lost.
Right, exactly. So this brings us to the next point, and that is the DIY kind of guest self-service aspect of it. And then the other ones are definitely in that format. But
true, yeah.
This is kind of like hands-on, make your cocktail the way you want to make it.
Yeah, and this is really a sliding scale. I mean, you can go all the way from arguably pouring your own punch is kind of DIY for guests, all the way up to just show them the bar and let them fend for themselves. And I think there are definitely some good options in between, however. One of my favorite options is kind of a cheater option, actually. And that is to make a homemade syrup. Because if you make a homemade syrup, you can then offer it in 3 different ways. For example, you serve it with sparkling water, and you've got a nice non-alcoholic version for the drivers at the party and things like, which there always are. So I personally like to have an option for them. Then instead of sparkling water, you can use sparkling wine, and then you've got a low-octane cocktail for folks who are not interested in something super spirited. And then instead, you could use vodka, and then you've got a true cocktail.
Yeah, and, add a little bit of citrus to that if you want to or not. And, you're on your way to having a really great kind of guest experiences, with cocktails. Now, another thing that you could do is actually do like a chalkboard special. So you would have a couple different bottles, and you would provide a cocktail recipe on a chalkboard on the wall, and basically just give directions on how to use those ingredients to make a cocktail. So one of the things that we talked about in one of the previous episodes was secret ingredients.
Yep.
And one of the things that plays well with pretty much every spirit I've ever tried is ginger beer.
That's true.
So, for example, Moscow Mule, vodka, ginger beer, and a little bit of lime juice. If you replace that with gin, it's a fantastic cocktail. You put tequila in its place. It's another fantastic cocktail. Bourbon, equally delicious. So it's a really flexible ingredient. And you can offer a bunch of different kind of cocktails with only having a very minimal investment as far as...
kind of a choose-your-own-adventure kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. Like, choose your base spirit and now go down that path.
And what's nice about this, from our perspective, selfishly, is, guests don't have a bunch... Well, it depends who your guests are, I suppose. But often guests are not actually professional bartenders. Sometimes it can be kind of fun seeing them try to follow the instructions.
Yeah, exactly. So you provide them a format, give them some general directions, and basically just kind of let them loose.
And take pictures.
Yeah, and this could be one of those things that, people are always asking, what can I bring? This is something that you can say, hey, bring a bottle of gin, bring a bottle of bourbon.
That's true.
Bring a mixer of some form.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to get people involved as well.
And I think people have fun with it, too. I mean, I think it's sort of out of vogue to have activities. I'm doing the air quotes here.
Air quotes, yeah.
Activities at parties. But in some ways, this kind of is an activity. It's something fun for people to do and have some fun with.
Now, one of the other things that we've done in the past that turned out really well was utilizing pour spouts that will kind of cut themselves off after a certain amount.
These things are brilliant. I did not know they existed until relatively recently.
Yeah, basically our wedding.
Yeah, basically. And what they are is they're a special kind of pour spout that you stick on top of a bottle. You can turn that bottle upside down and it's going to pour exactly the amount the pour spout is designed to dispense.
Yeah.
So this is amazing because your guests don't need to use jiggers. They don't need to measure anything. It's not as sticky, which is my absolute arch enemy, which is a terrible idea for marrying a bartender, but you're going to avoid some of that stickiness. And so what you can do is you can, again, do some sort of chalkboard special where you provide the instructions, but instead of folks having to go through the details of pouring things out and measuring and all that good stuff, they can just turn the bottle upside down into their shaker or their glass, and it's going to stop at the right time. So it really simplifies the process.
Yeah, and then for our wedding, what we did, and just as an example, is we made a DIY, I think it was a Bellini bar.
It was a Bellini bar, yeah.
So we had like 3 different liqueurs. With a half-ounce pour on top and sparkling champagne. And the beautiful thing is, you could either have a cocktail or you could have just sparkling wine on its own. So it's kind of multi-purpose and it's kind of fun. And you can get as elaborate with this as you really want to.
But you also don't need to. Yeah,
you really don't. So it's a lot of fun. And it's a fun way to get people talking and, having a great time.
I don't know why these pour spouts aren't everywhere. Like, I feel like that'd be super useful for things like olive oil.
Yeah, I think so. But I'm actually really curious.
Watch me, guys. I'm about to go install some pour spouts around our kitchen.
And I think this is one of those things that I need to test out, as just from like the cocktail geek in me.
Are you just basically telling me not to put a pour spout on the olive oil?
Do. But I think that one of the things is like my scientific mind is like, oh, what about viscosity? Like certain things pour different. Yeah, I know. This is going to be a different subject for probably one of our bar above videos. It makes a lot more sense.
Okay, I'm thinking olive oil. I'm thinking all of our salad vinegars. I'll get back to you on this one, folks.
Maybe motor oil.
Motor oil. There you go. We probably want to wash them in between.
Oh, man. So like I said, you don't need a lot of work to incorporate some of these elements into a party that you're hosting and to have it really fun and interactive and really engaging for your guests and let you do what you do as a guest or as a host, and that is interact and make sure everyone's having a great time.
And not have to be shaking drinks all night.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have a couple tips for everybody, and that is if you're using like fresh juices, like we said before, you don't want to incorporate those into the cocktails until about 4 hours before the event. They just get a tendency to kind of mute their flavors. The acidity kind of drops down, and lime juice has a tendency to oxidize fairly quickly.
Yeah, so, in my personal opinion, I feel like 4 hours before the event, I'm usually doing something else. I'm cooking or something. So for me, I almost prefer another option, which is if you don't have time to juice citrus or you're like me and you're doing something else, there's another, it's not as good. I'm not going to pretend it's as good, but another option is that you can go to the freezer section in your grocery store and find the lime or lemon juice concentrate. You have to be careful because it's not the same as the limeade or lemonade, is it? Or is it the same stuff?
No, I think it's different actually. Yeah.
Be careful about the sugar content because if you get the wrong one, it's just going to be super sweet and just completely blow out your cocktails, which you can do that, but you're going to need to adjust your recipe. So regardless, whatever you buy, taste it, check it with your recipe ahead of time, and then that is a nice sort of pre-prepped option for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you're going to be serving cocktails without shaking or stirring the ice, make sure that you account for the water because that is one of the vital ingredients for a cocktail is whenever you shake or stir something, it's typically about 20% water that you're adding just through dilution from the melted ice.
I had no idea about this.
So my suggestion is, a couple days in advance, make yourself a cocktail, the cocktail that you're going to be serving for your party, and measure out your ingredients before you add them to ice. And then when you're done chilling and diluting and everything, measure it again. And the difference between what you started with and what you ended with is going to be your water content.
So you can go ahead and add that to the recipe itself if you're going to be chilling it in, say, a freezer or a fridge or something, because you won't need the ice to chill the cocktail, but you do need the water to make that recipe balance out.
Right. So, do that ahead of time. And the day before, whatever, you can start to chill out your ingredients.
Chill out, man.
Chill out, man. So you can put all your ingredients in the fridge, and then when you incorporate them together, they're not going to dilute even more ice. So they're already going to be cold. They're not going to bring down the temperature, and they're not going to add more water to your cocktail.
I like this option a lot because even if you, I mean, again, if we go back to the punch option or the drink dispenser option, if you have ice in that container over time, especially if you have a couple or several hour long party, that drink is changing. And by the end of the night, it's going to be a lot more diluted. So I kind of like this option as a way to kind of head it off at the pass and then find some other way to keep it cold in a way that's not going to dilute. Now, one other thing that we did not mention is if you are using a drink dispenser, I totally forgot about this because I was getting so excited about lime juice. Happens all the time. If you are using a drink dispenser, there's something you should know, and that is to be really careful about the ingredients that you choose. Because if you're using things like fruit purees, they can settle to the bottom of your drink dispenser, and the nature of those is typically they're pouring out of the bottom,
right? Which
means your guests are going to be getting just a mouthful of fruit. Not a bad thing, but
exactly.
It's not going to be the cocktail you intended. So your options are you can keep stirring it, which honestly, if you're going to do a drink that you're going to need to keep stirring, put it in a punch bowl because people generally do stir it throughout the evening, or just choose something that's not going to have that kind of a settling problem.
Right. And just have fun with it, and just really enjoy the process, and I think your guests will as well.
Definitely. And if you have any good recipes, I would absolutely love to hear them. We've got a couple parties coming up, and I want to steal your good thoughts. Kidding. Kind of.
Kind of.
So definitely let us know in the comments if you've got any good recipes. So next week, we're meeting with a bit of an internet celebrity who's become so famous on Reddit, if you've heard of it, that he's actually launching his own cocktail book. So come back next Wednesday and find out who it is and what Reddit is.
Exactly. And don't forget to head on over to mixologytalk.com/27 for the notes for the show and the recipes we mentioned.
So if you are enjoying the show, please consider leaving us a review in iTunes. If you're not enjoying the show, then you can skip it. Like, it's cool.
Yeah. So basically, it's like when you go to the bar, you tip. You leave a couple tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a tip for us. So head on over there, give us a great review, or not. We definitely appreciate the 5 stars. And that'll help us reach more people.
It helps us reach more people, and we really appreciate your feedback. It means a lot to us.
Absolutely.
So everybody who has left us a review, thank you. That is so awesome to read your thoughts, and feels good, man.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Never miss an episode by subscribing in iTunes or YouTube. And as always, check out the show notes by clicking on the right.